What was your favorite or most meaningful Holy Land experience in sight? My most meaningful experience was the empty tomb, the Holy Sepulchre. And I went there at a very difficult time in my life. I had lost my father shortly before I was there, and was going through a difficult time with my own discernment of vocation to the priesthood, and school was also being kind of hard for me at the same time as well. And I had the strong sense that I was going to find something by going into the tomb. And I actually waited a long time before I even went to the Holy Sepulchre. I'd get up early in the morning when I first got to Jerusalem, and I'd go kind of sit over by the altar where Golgotha is, and I'd think about maybe going down and going inside the tomb. But I was scared I was going to have some sort of profound experience that I wasn't ready for yet. So it was really towards the end of the trip when I went there, and it was when I had the opportunity to be locked in overnight, and it was about 1 o'clock in the morning, and I thought, well, now is a kind of quiet moment. I'll go and I'll have this profound experience that I've been waiting to have this entire trip. And I went into this to the inner part of the tomb, which is a small chamber where there's the slab where Jesus was laid. And then there's a whole bunch of these oil-burning lamps in a very confined area. And I knelt down and I said, Lord, I'm here. And then I could barely breathe because it was about 110 degrees inside there from all those lamps burning, and it had no ventilation, so the air is not all that good to breathe inside there either. And I waited about a minute, and I said, I'm sorry, I can't stay in here anymore. And I got up and left, and I left really disappointed that I thought I was going to have something there, but I didn't. And it stuck with me for a long time, and I remember going back to seminary that fall, and I sadly told this experience to my spiritual director, saying, Father, I'd been waiting to have this experience, and I didn't have it. And he was this very wise figure who kind of leaned back in his chair, and he said, no, you had exactly what you were looking for. I said, what do you mean? I didn't get anything there. And he says, well, Jesus got out of the tomb, and so should you. What you're looking for is not in there because Christ left. And for me, I've never thought about the tomb, and I've never thought about the reality of the resurrection the same way again. So I went from this moment of bitter disappointment in the empty tomb to saying it was this place where my spiritual healing in many ways began. And so for me, it's this kind of bittersweet, because it's not a place. When I went the second time, I had no desire to go inside there again. I'd ended up taking a group inside there because we were walking through, but I felt like I'd found everything that I needed, because there was nothing, because whatever Christ was doing with me, I was healed in that experience of my own frustration and disappointment, and then release.
For me, my first time was 2008, and last time 2022. So over the span of those 14 years, I'd say a different experience every time. The first time was, I remember putting on my alb for the first time, which was a few months before being ordained a deacon, and then assisting just as serving Mass as an altar server in the tomb. That was first. As I mentioned earlier, being in the cave above the Sea of Galilee was another time. Garden of Gethsemane another time. Cana was a profound experience at one of those trips, because we had a lot of married couples with us and watching them exchange their vows. And I said earlier, the last time was just at the Sea of Galilee, and being actually in the water, like you had also said earlier. So those are, I think every time you go, there might be a different experience of what's most profound.
Sure. So I sharing my experience of the empty tomb and attending Mass was probably the most remarkable experience. But another one that comes immediately to mind also at the Sea of Galilee was just an afternoon in which I experienced just pure joy, really. I think it was a bunch of us. We had the opportunity, Father Matt and Father Michael and I, to spend a few days kind of on a mini retreat on the Mount of Beatitudes. And so it was, as we were told, and I've told when I've kind of helped to lead pilgrimages before, is that it's a pilgrimage, not a vacation. And so you're moving. There are times when you're tired. You got to stick to a schedule. As amazing as the experience is, but that kind of mountaintop experience, that retreat experience, was a really wonderful couple of days, but there was an afternoon in which several of us went down to the Sea of Galilee. We're swimming and joking, and then making our way back up, the steep trail back up to the mountain. Just the laughter and the joy, and that really has stayed with me. And a couple of the pictures, hundreds of pictures, of course, but a couple of the pictures from that making that way back up the trail have been some of my favorite, because and most of those guys are now brother priests, 10 years later, and that experience of just the joy of that shared experience, the joy of following Jesus Christ. And I don't wonder, but I imagine that there were probably those moments too that the disciples were able to experience with Christ, as busy as they were and as exhausting as that must have been, and mysterious, and, unfulfilled expectations, whatever. But those times of just that fraternity, and that sheer joy of that shared experience of following Jesus Christ. So that always sticks with me.
One spot that pops out for me, there are many, and some you've mentioned, but one additional one was in Nazareth, when you get to go to the Church of the Annunciation. There's an altar where it happened. And there's this little plaque, and we all know the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. There's just this little plaque there that says, the Word became flesh here. And just reading that, or just, contemplating that, pondering that in that moment as you're standing right there, it's one of those spots among many, but one of those spots that's just mind-blowing and just so beautiful. And so getting to go there and getting to see that and getting to just feel that in that moment, or celebrate Mass, as you're there, it really is just this wonderful thing. And that was such a special spot for me.